And I'm the oldest
You want to do this one? I mean, I don't have to do one.
of three.
I've done plenty. Okay.
Oldest of three boys in the family, and my father was from Alabama, and my mother was from Savannah, Georgia, the same town where Clarence Thomas grew up. That's an infamous note. And so anyway, he was I've come from a family of preachers. I was never a minister myself or anything like that. And my grandfather was a preacher in a small town called Wedowee, Alabama. That church is still there, actually. And both parents had a couple of years of college. That's an unusual thing at that time. So I'm not the first time in college member of my family on either side. So that by the time I was born, they both had had some college and stuff like that. And by the time that actually I was born just after World War II had started, even in 1939. So I came up during the war. We've had wars ever since I've been around, and we're still at it. We haven't given it up yet. Anyway, I'll let her
We're
go.
going to have to do some paperwork, and then we're going to have to do a reintroduction just for our transcriptionists.
But even so, having a sort of middle-class background as far as black people were concerned, I was a very nerdy kid long before the word ever came out. So, but nevertheless, even because of that, I was affected by the Jim Crow nature of the town that I lived in. And there were lots of limitations that I experienced educationally simply because things were not available. I could not, for example, visit the downtown library. Could you believe that? I mean, this is unbelievable. And when I finally got a chance to do that, I think I was already out of high school. And so I then, my mother told me about the first experience I had in the racist South. I was a kid, probably too young to read the signs on the water fountains that said colored and white. And my mom said that I rushed to the first water fountain that I saw, which happened to be the white one. And she had to snatch me away because I wasn't supposed to drink water out of the white water fountain. I didn't know that, of course, at the time. And I was just a kid. So that was the first real experience. Actually, I didn't, of course, realize it. Then,
would it be all right if we could restart and we could introduce ourselves?
Huh?
Would it be okay if we could introduce ourselves and start over?
Sure.
And get the recording?
Start all over?
Yes. Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah,
Okay, no problem. No, not at all. Not at
so
all.
we're gonna introduce ourselves with the mic, and then we'll ask you to introduce yourself again, and then ask questions.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna hit stop, and then you don't say, right? Yeah. Okay. And.
Okay, as I said before, the start at the very beginning, at the top.
She's gonna introduce first.
Just for
Go ahead.
purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna say, Hello, my name is Vanesa Obando, and I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Today is July 10th, 2023, and I am interviewing Bill Tucker in Tallahassee, Florida.
I'm Ashley Sanguino.
I'm Lorena Manasturean.
And I'm Avery Goodman.
Okay. All right.
Could you please introduce yourself for us? What is your full name? Can you spell it for us?
My full name is William P. Tucker, Princeton, and I'm, as I said, was born in 1940 in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's why I came up until I was there until I finished college, and then I left and went to the military, and that's a whole nother history, but and then got out of the military, went to graduate school. And eventually got a PhD in physics and taught at FAMU for almost 30 years now. Anyway, going back at the very beginning, as I said, that my experience in growing up in Atlanta was not what you might think, because Atlanta was considered to be a progressive city, but not during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And so I'm a product of all of that. As I said before, my initial exposure to racism was when I had drank out the white water fountain. That was one thing. Then my mom told me about the kinds of things that she experienced growing up in Savannah and stuff like that. And then they went to college and met my father, and they got married and all that kind of stuff. And then I was born. Then while I was growing up, as I said, I was a nerdy kid. And I did all kinds of stuff. I built airplanes and things like that. And I was a bookworm. I was a vociferous reader. Had Reader's Digest in the house, Boys Life. I was in the Boy Scouts and all of that kind of thing. The usual stuff. In the city, of course, there was segregation everywhere. We went to a segregated elementary school, high school, and everything else. But when I started the school, my parents started me off at the age of 5 in Seventh-day Adventist school. They're still around. And then I went to the public school for a while. My mom decided that they weren't providing us with enough training, so I got into the Catholic school for a while. Out of Catholic school, back to public schools. And things continued at that point. Then I remember by the time I got through elementary school and into high school, the 8th grade, I remember as if it happened yesterday, when the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas came out. It was a bright, sunny day. My citizenship teacher came in and announced the Supreme Court decision about Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. And I can remember that day, the sun was shining and everything else like that. And I thought my life would change. Of course, it did change in a lot of ways, but not for us. One of the things my mom told me during the time that we were coming up in the school is that the books that we brought home from school, you look inside the books and you would see that there were hand-me-downs from the white schools. We got the hand-me-downs. And I remember that story. That's how things were in Atlanta in the public school system. Then I, of course, went on to high school, and as I said, I was a nerdy kid, and I did all kinds of stuff. I was into science and gadgets and stuff like that. But by the time I was in the 9th grade, I guess it was, I built my first telescope. Okay, so I'm an astronomer. That's one of the things I do. And won a prize in the science fair and stuff like that. That's one of the things that happened during the high schools and the other schools. The teachers were rather protective of us because they knew how important it was that we continue our school education, because that was the only way we were going to move up in this world. And then I moved on, and I kept doing stuff, and I became a kind of a library person. There was a library. There was only one library that we could attend as black people, called the West Hunter Street Library, and I would go there all the time. And they had two sections in the library, one for the kids under 12, which was me at the time, and then those over 12. Well, I exhausted that under 12 crowd pretty quick. I wanted to go over to the adult side and read those books. And I had to, they finally let me in there. But I was never able to go downtown to the big library that had all of the books that I really wanted to look at and read. But that's what it was all the time. And of course, at the time, the local library, the library for black people, had, these special reading programs. You read 10 books, you don't get stuff like that. You may have gone through all of that too. You guys are all the University of Florida, so you have all those advantages. So then I did that for quite a while. Then I got more ambitious and decided to build a bigger telescope. And by the time I was in the 11th grade, I built that huge thing, weighed 200 pounds, it was big. And my classmates would come out to my house to look at the stars and the planets and the moon and stuff like that. I operated my own little educational operation. Anyway, then, interesting, these are little points in life. There's a school called Agnes Scott College in Atlanta, very close to where we live. And there was an astronomer out there who taught there, and we went out there, me and a friend of mine, and he gave me some equipment to test my telescope and do all that kind of stuff. And I remember his name, William Calder. I remember that guy's name even today, after all those years when I was just a teenager. But so he really was very helpful, because he had never seen any black kids do this kind of stuff before. But anyway, I did that, and I'll never forget, I one time asked him if I could join the Atlanta Astronomy Club. He said he didn't think they would accept me. I couldn't join their youth group. I never forgot that. That was crushing.
What
Hear
was his
him tell
reasoning?
me that I couldn't be a member of a local club that I knew that I was qualified to be,
Right.
and would add value to it, because I built bigger telescopes than a lot of them had. Anyway, that didn't work out. So, but I continued my drive, and then I decided that I could make this instrument bigger. So I went all the way. By the time I got to the late in the 11th grade, I decided I needed more help. So I got in touch with some physics people at Georgia Tech. And I went out there, and they were very helpful. But, and I would have gone to Georgia Tech if they had been admitting black people at the time, instead of the school that I wound up at Morehouse. And, but going to Tech would have been my dream school, because they had everything I wanted in terms of facilities and access and stuff like that. So that was a crushing realization. Finally, I think it was that I wound up getting a scholarship to Morehouse, and then the library apparently opened up downtown, and I was able, for the first time in my life, go to the big library of the city, the largest one. And I all of a sudden discovered all of the books that I really wanted to read, could read, were there. And but that's very late in I was almost like 18, something like that. And even before, by the time I turned 18, I remember that the teachers took all of us who were getting 18 downtown to register to vote. Okay. So we all marched, we all went downtown, got on the bus, went downtown en masse. And I walked into the voter registration place and there was this old white guy sitting there. And he put out this book that I was supposed to read a piece of the Constitution. I didn't have to count jelly beans or count soap bubbles, none of that stuff, but I did have to read a piece of the Constitution, state. I read maybe 10 words, he said, okay, go ahead. Not even that much. It was just a joke. You had to prove that you could, they had this literacy test for black people to vote. And that was, I remember that as if it were yesterday too. I said, my God, you know, they put me through this. By this time I was a high school graduate, ready to graduate from high school. And so that was the beginning of my political activity, active career. Then of course at that time, by the time I graduated from high school in '58, then I got into college and I was going to school there, and then the '60s began and the civil rights era started. That's when I became a little bit more active. And at Morehouse, the president, Benjamin Mays at the time, says, you know, be careful about putting your career, going to jail and getting locked up for marching. But I did march anyway, just like everybody else. And some of them dropped out of school, like Julian Bond. He was also with us, but he came back later on. Excuse me. So then I was involved in that as much as possible, and spent time engaged in civil rights history, but not as much because I was trying to get out of college. I had two brothers coming behind me, and at the time, getting into college, going to school, paying for it was easy. I was able to do that because I was working at the gas station pumping gas. I could make enough money during the summer, pretty much to pay for my tuition. You can't do that today.
No.
Cannot do that today. It's incredible. And so then I did all of that to get through college, and finally, by the time Atlanta had begun to open up, for example, there were parks downtown that we could not sit. I remember it hurt Paul, very open area, but black people couldn't sit there. I grew up near a railroad track. Literally, on one side of the tracks, white people lived. On the other side of the track, black people lived. There was a park right across the tracks that I could not visit. I could walk there in 2 minutes. There was a school near me. I could hear the swings making noise and stuff. It was that close. But I had to walk 2 or 3 more miles away to a different school that was available to me, but I couldn't go to this other school which had all white kids. And the white kids lived on one side of the tracks, and we lived on the other side. So that was pretty much it. I remember one time that when the white kids would come to the park to play, and we were on one side, there was a bank, and we threw rocks at each other. you wouldn't believe it. We had little wars. Nobody ever got hurt, but it wasn't pretty. It wasn't exciting. So we threw rocks at each other, and then that all eventually left by the time I got growing up and into college. Then I finished school, and at the time, now remember back in those days they drafted people. Mm-hmm. So I kept getting deferments, things called deferments, where they let you stay in college. As soon as I graduated, the military sent me this notice telling me that I was being reclassified 1A. I thought, oh, they're coming for me.
And when was this? What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
62. Graduated 62. By the way, I'm rambling back here. One time, my freshman year, I came down with appendicitis. I don't know how and I got sick. And I had to go into the hospital for surgery. I nearly died from that one. But the Grady Hospital, which is the main hospital in the city of Atlanta, it had a segregated section called Hugh Spalding. That was the part that I was in. And of course, I got through that, of course. But I insisted on staying in college. My mom said, maybe I'll take a year. I said, no, I take a year off. I want to get out of here. Anyway, by the time I was ready to move into the world, and I said I got a reclassification notice, then it was time. The Air Force came out recruiting black people at these colleges because we didn't have ROTC at Morehouse. And there was a shortage of officers in the Air Force, really short, very few. And they were trying to build it up. So I didn't want to get drafted. And I decided, let me see if I can go in on my own terms and avoid that, because I knew they were going to get me. There was no reason for me not to get drafted anyway. So I joined the Air Force because it freed up some money and made it possible for me to get a career of some sort going. Then they shipped me off to Lackland Air Force Base for officer training school. 90 days, boom, I'm commissioned a second lieutenant. Okay, so I started out that way. Then they shipped me off to Biloxi, Mississippi. That's a whole different world. Things hadn't moved very far in Mississippi by that time. Atlanta had gone ahead. Mississippi was a throwback in time. As soon as I got there, the first thing they did was tell me about segregation. Still exists in Mississippi. I couldn't go to the beach. I couldn't do a lot of things. And then I was on tech school, electronics. And that's why I was sent there, because I had the background in physics. So then there's an experience I had. I was an officer by this time. And I got on a bus on the base from Keesler Air Force Base, which is where I was stationed. And I got on the bus to go into town. The bus left the base. After the bus left the base, the driver told me to move to the back of the bus.
And what year was this again?
That was in '63, in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what? By this time in Atlanta, you could ride anywhere on the bus. Atlanta had integrated the buses after Rosa Parks and all of that stuff. Okay. I was incredulous. I'm thinking, are you crazy? So I'm sitting up on an officer in this town. I'm wearing my uniform, and you order me to the back of the bus? Are you out of it? I got off the bus. Because I knew he was going. And the military was very fussy. They didn't want us to get in any kind of trouble there. So I got off the bus, walked back to the base, went to the Inspector General the IG, and complained. And I said, I want the bus company banned from the base until they clear this up. He said, listen, Lieutenant, if we do that, then nobody else will be able to ride the bus. In other words, I will inconvenience the white riders if the bus is banned because of my being hurt or offended. And that upset me. That I remember. So then I joined a local protest group. I think it was the NAACP on the base. And, but I was only there for a year, see, and it was a very intensive program where I had to go to electronics school 6 hours a day for 52 weeks. That's a lot of training, so engineering type of background. So I got through all of that. And while I was there in tech school, I'll never forget one other incident that occurred. Now here I'm in class with a bunch of other officers. I was the only black person there. We got used to that kind of stuff. I know when I graduated from officer training school, when I got my commission at the officer training school, my mom came out to see the graduation. She'd already seen one graduation. Here I'm graduating from another program, and it was only a handful of black people in the whole class of hundreds, you know. And so by this time I had an uncle who was also an officer in the Air Force. Anyway, that was in San Antonio. That was basically years ago. But anyway, back to this thing in Mississippi. While I was there in Mississippi, in this training program to be an electronics officer, somebody came to the base and came to the class that I was in and invited everybody in the class to come down to this special tech presentation at a hotel in downtown Biloxi. But I was told that I couldn't come. I was the only one in the room who could not attend because of segregation. So I couldn't go. Everybody else I'm surprised that the Air Force didn't tell them, no, if he can't go, none of them can go. But they didn't do that. I was supposed to suck it up and endure because that was the law of the state. And here I am, giving myself to the military and the Army and the Air Force, and I'm having to deal with racism in a state just because they don't like us having access to the system. And so then that was a bad experience. But eventually, one thing we learned to do, we had to be tough because things were never really very good. That's what Jim Crow was about, having to deal with these slights that come up and you never forget them. They always stick with you. A lot of things you don't remember, but these things stay with you. That's why when it comes up again, we're not surprised. And we're always upset with these kinds of things. But we've been resilient and we've been taught that you have to. That's why going to college and for black people is so important. That was the only way out, the only way out. But even on the way, you ran into these roadblocks and these various things that happened to you. So by the time I left Mississippi, I guess it was 63, yeah. And they shipped me off to Cheyenne, Wyoming. I don't know if it's been to Cheyenne. And that was a good experience. I only stayed up there about 2 or 3 months. Then they moved me. I was going to be a missile launch officer on ICBMs, starting World War III. God knows, that was different. Anyway, so then I went to Denver and Stayed there for a while, and then military moves you around a lot. Then to Texas for some more training. By this time I got promoted to first lieutenant, you know. Before I ever even pulled duty or anything, I spent most of my time in the schools, different kinds of schools. That's one thing is that they provide you with a lot of education, extra education. Even though I had a degree, I spent another year and a half in school. But then by the time I got to, I guess it was, I wound up back in Colorado, spent about a year and a half living in missile silos. Things just kind of quieted down for a while. Didn't see much after that. Denver's a nice town. I enjoyed living there. Really, I loved it. But then they shipped me off to New York, upstate New York. Things were okay in Watertown, New York. I'm sorry, sir. Sorry. Let me turn this thing off here.
That's okay.
Okay. Anyway, then I lived there for about a year or so ago. Then Vietnam was raging by this time. So I was supposed to go there and get involved in that war. I didn't really want to do that, but the Air Force decides where you go. They instead shipped me off to Japan. Okay, so I wound up in Japan in '65, I think it was, yeah. And I said I wanted to get out. They said, no, I'm sorry, you got to stay in because we made the assignment before you could ask for separation. So, so then that's when I found out something else about racism. When I got to Japan, I don't think I was there for 2 weeks before I noticed something. This one young officer came in, he said, let's go on into town and enjoy ourselves, a little village right outside the base. So I went into the village with this young white officer and walked into this nightclub. We got clubs all over the place, you know. I noticed that the Japanese waitresses were ignoring me, pretending, you know, I'm just a nice looking young man, 20 something. But they were catering to him, but they ignored me. It didn't take me long before I finally figured out that the clubs were segregated in Japan. That American racism had been exported to the Japanese. I was incredulous. I said, what? I kept, so then I said, well, maybe this guy's a distraction, he's popular here, let me go by myself. Same thing. They would grudgingly serve me whatever I wanted because I had money. But other than that, none of that being nice and stuff like that, because these girls were there to entertain guys. Anyway, I then decided, I said, I can't deal with this. So I kept moving around. Finally, I ran into one club where there was nothing but black guys in. I said, oh, this is what's going on. There is a black club, and then there are the white ones. My God, I said, I'm not gonna put up with this. I then never went back, and I enrolled in a Japanese course. I learned to speak Japanese. I got fluent in that language in 2 years. And so then I'm not gonna be bothered with these clubs that are near the base. They're just racist. So I was in a city of about 1 million people. So
What was the name of the city?
Fukuoka in Kyushu, the southern part, the southernmost island in Japan. I enjoyed myself. By the time, once I learned the language and became cultured, I could spend the whole day and never speak a word of English. and so then my job as an officer on this military base was to go around to these different bases and stuff like that and do inspection work in the electronics and radar equipment. And I would come back and classify the stuff secret. That's why I knew what classifications were all about and how dangerous it is to have your hands on classified documents, because I created some. Anyway, I spent 2 years in the Far East, really enjoyed myself, went to different places in different countries and stuff like that. And then finally I decided to get out and leave the Air Force, because I wanted to go to graduate school. So that's what I did. I gave up my commission, came back to the U.S. and enrolled in the University of Denver in the physics department. Okay. Then at one time, oh, I know what it was, yeah. I needed to find some place to stay. And so I started looking around for different apartments and stuff like that. I discovered that as you go around the city looking for a place to stay, I always seem to get there just too late. We just rented it. Oh my God, I said, how is it that I just keep being a day late and $1 short? They just rented it. And finally, I ran across one place, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry." So I said, "Well, let me try another attack." I had the phone number, so I then went and called her up over the phone. Obviously, I had a funny kind of accent. She couldn't tell whether I was black or white, you know. So sure enough, I called her up about that same place that I was told was already rented. "Oh, no, it's fine. Come on out." I showed up, and she said, "Oh, aren't you the one who was just here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm the same guy." She said, "Well, I don't object to black people living here. It's just that the tenants don't want any." I said, "I don't think the tenants care, personally." But she was pushing. So I finally rented there and stayed there about a year or so. And that was pretty much it. So I went to graduate school, and finally, by the time I was ready to get my degree, my advisor had to leave because he couldn't get tenure. So we both moved to Ohio. Somebody told me, he said, "Why don't you stick around and get your degree from here?" I said, no. They told me, "You're married to this guy until you get finished." Are you in graduate school? No?
No.
Oh, okay, all right. Anyway, so I moved to Ohio University in Athens and spent a year there, and I'll never forget that experience either. They treated me okay. I had money by this time. I had scholarships and stuff, so I never, I went to graduate school, never paid $1. It was always free. When you go into physics, they don't charge you anything because you're a teaching assistant and stuff like that. You get paid. So anyway, I was there, and by this time I had finished all my work, done the comprehensives and everything. There was nothing else to do but write a dissertation. And that's all I was going to do. Well, this German, one faculty member didn't think it was good for me to come there and get a degree so quickly. And I said, "Well, wait a minute. I said, I can go back to Denver and get it. I don't need to stay here." So they prevailed upon. So he said, "Well, we got to make him do something." So I had to take the language exam over again. And so I had languages in German, Spanish, and Japanese. Of course, I then decided, okay, I'll go ahead and take the German exam again, because I had 2 years of German in college. And so I translated something by Einstein, and that was good enough. And so I passed the language exam the second time. Okay. And eventually got my degree in 1974. And then I came to FAMU and that was another experience. When I first got here, the first thing I noticed, the difference between FAMU and Florida State. I was struck by that contrast. Here, and I saw how the other half lived on the other side of the tracks again. Here we are again. But that was a good experience because Florida State had a great library, and I benefited from having that school as close and having as much access as I had to it. So it helped me. I probably might not have come here or stayed here if it had not been for having a big major research school a mile away, that close. So that it was okay. So I spent the next 25 years or so, almost 30 years until I retired about 15 years ago. And I've been retired ever since. So I've been doing stuff like that. But the Jim Crow South is something that I remember forever. In fact, one incident, I saw police brutality up front and close. I remember being on the bus, and suddenly the cops pulled up, and this poor vagrant, a guy who was drunk, was on the side, and they just started beating the crap out of him, like, you know, Rodney King style, and just threw him in the back of the car. And I never forgot. I said, my God, this is what life is all about. So these are the kinds of things that you deal with, and that's what happened. And that's why the here and now that we're coming up on this kind of stuff, I can imagine because of the Supreme Court decision about this woman who said that she's not going to do a website for an LGBTQ, even though there's no such, she's never done a wedding website for one, and she was lying, and there was no such person. But the Supreme Court ruled it anyway. So I can see a situation where some guy might say, I'm a sandwich artist. I'm a pizza artist. I do pizza, that's my way of expression. And I don't like black people. So I'm not gonna make available to black people my artistry in making pizza. So you can't have a slice of pizza because I don't. It's just that open. The road is open for them to go back to the days when we couldn't eat at lunch counters. I mean, I can't, are they crazy? They think we're gonna put up with this kind of stuff? See, and that's why I say the youth have to do something like that. They've taken away your rights, one after another, and they're gonna come after you depending on what you look like. And what your particular political, it's astonishing. Things are going backwards. That's what they mean by make America great again. It was never great. And it was, so that's kind of how it is. And I went through these experiences because it was just what life was about in the South. But we had good teachers who insisted that we stay the course and moved on and get ourselves straight and of course get our education. So that's why I knew I had to go all the way through school and get everything all the way up to the PhD. After I finally got a doctorate, then I thought that was okay. I could do anything I wanted, and I spent a lot of time and going around to different places. I used to go to California on a regular basis on postdocs and stuff like that, and work in very government labs and stuff and things like that. At one time, I had a nice laboratory at Florida State, the Mag Lab. That was really good. I enjoyed that. That was really a nice experience. But then the Mag Lab didn't really want us there. We had a big operation there from FAMU in the physics department because we had a huge physics department about that. We offer PhDs in physics now. We probably graduated more black women in physics with doctorates than any other school in this country. And I'll never forget when there were very few black people with PhDs in physics, very few. In fact, it's incredible that you look on a map, and they had this one map I remember seeing where they showed the blacks who got doctorates in physics, and there was one dot sitting out there in Ohio, and that was me. I said, my God, I'm the only one in the whole state, in the whole Midwest that got a doctorate that year.
Wow.
In physics, yes, that happened. So that's the one thing that we had to deal with, being the one case in every single situation. But that's what it's about. Hopefully now, in fact, I just saw an interview on TV this morning. One black woman, apparently she's got a PhD in astronomy. She was an actress, and she went back and forth, but she was on Morning Joe, and Mika Brzezinski was interviewing her, and she's one of 26 black women with a doctorate in astronomy, astrophysics. Only 26. At one time, I knew all of the blacks in physics who were doctors. All of them, nearly all of them. Now I don't know all, most of them I don't know. Things have changed. So things have gotten better, but then the further we move forward, the further back things seem to go. So this latest round, what's going on right now is a scary, scary scenario. We can see all kinds of stuff. Like, you know, nobody thought Roe v. Wade would get reversed, but look at it. It happened. It's going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. And they're just out for one thing after another. They're taking away rights one after another. And this homophobic thing is out of control. And the governor of your state is just totally out of control of our state. I mean, the sad thing is that he's going to be back as governor for the next 2 years because he's not going to be president. And we'll have to deal with it. And I saw what they did to New College. That one time, I used to be president of the faculty union, and one time they said, well, why don't FAMU model itself after New College, an HBCU version of New College? I thought that was an intriguing idea, but we never pursued it. If we had, we'd be the same shape there and now. They would have been cashiered. That school's going to go into the dumps. It will no longer be what it used to be. And it used to be a model of academic excellence. They're not going to get any students anymore. And DEI is gone. You heard about that, of course. And they've taken all those programs. So all of that is going to happen. I don't know what the University of Florida is going to do about it, because that's the flagship. But you don't hear anything from the president, do you? He hasn't said a word. Same thing with all of them. Okay. Got any questions?
Yeah, so you mentioned how the Jim Crow era.
Huh?
You mentioned how the Jim Crow era was a period of just slights being faced by black people and people of color over and over again, and how higher education was often a tool that was used to be able to overcome some of these challenges.
Hang on, I got it here. Hang on, sir. Go ahead. Now, what?
Yeah, so you mentioned how the Jim Crow era was filled with all these slights that black people had to face over and over again. And you mentioned how higher education was often used as a tool to overcome some of these challenges.
That's right. That was the way out.
Yeah, so as we're looking into another era of a rollback of human rights and civil rights, what suggestions would you have for the future of what tools can we use beyond higher education? What do we have available to us to be able to, you know, overcome these slights that we're facing?
Vote, vote, vote. That's it. You gotta vote your way out of this mess. And we gotta convert things, because we don't have a majority enough. And I really think that the government should change the Supreme Court. Biden needs to realize that if he expands the court, he can take away that supermajority that they've got, because the Supreme Court it's been a den of iniquity. I'm sorry to say that, for much of the history of black people. There have been periods during the Warren Court when things were better, but now things have gotten such that we're seeing a regression, and sadly enough, I'm so glad to see Ketanji Brown Jackson on the court. She's making a big difference.
Yes.
And that's really important that we look at that. And Clarence Thomas has been I can't believe, here's a man who benefited from affirmative action. That's how he got through Yale. He hates the fact that he benefited from it. He's ashamed of it. And he doesn't think it should ever be available to anybody else. For example, let's look at this recent decision involving Harvard and the University of North Carolina. Harvard, the Asian students, there are no Asians complaining about Harvard. Asians make up 20% of the student body. They're not 20% of the population. Yet, there's no discrimination against Asians at Harvard. Not when they got 20% and the blacks only 6%. So what's going on there? It's just more of the big lie that they keep perpetrating. We know about the legacy thing. I remember one guy came on TV and said that he was black, he had a PhD. He said both his parents are graduates of Harvard. Legacy didn't get him in. So it's the thing that we need to do is that I hate to say it, you may have to get back out into the streets again. This is not, and I can see that now. I noticed that, for example, in a lot of these protest movements, there are a lot more white people in these things than it used to be. It used to be us. Now it's all mixed up. The youth have got to learn how they got to vote. They can turn this whole thing around completely. And I can't understand why women make up the majority of the population. They could, by themselves, completely overdo this whole thing. And that's what needs to happen. It's political activism is what's going to be required in order to get this done. In other words, that's what you need to do. Vote, 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 vote. And we used to joke and say, vote early and vote often. But you don't need to do that. We just need to get people out there. And I think that will change it around. Once the Republicans see, because it used to be, Martin Luther King was a Republican. I don't know if you knew that. Because, but that's back in the day when the Republicans were the leaders. But it changed when Lyndon Johnson came alongside the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. He knew then he lost the Democratic Party. That's when they all went and became Republicans and stuff like that. The same people. They were the Dixiecrats. They were the dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who kept us down. And that was what was going on. We had all kinds of situations. I used to read the newspaper in Atlanta all the time. If a crime was committed by a black person, they always identified the race. Colored person did this. If it was done by a white person, no mention of race. They don't mention that. So then you knew the difference. They made sure that we were identified, but nobody else was. I knew that was going on. But, for example, in this town, just in Tallahassee, Democrat, you live in Gainesville, right?
Yes.
Okay. Obituaries come out all the time. But Thursday, the obituary day for black people. That's when most of the black obituaries show up on Thursday. Almost all of them. You wouldn't think that, would you? But it does. We know when to look. if somebody died, and my age, that's happening. I spent a lot of time in churches. And when somebody died, then we wait till Thursdays, come out, because that's when we see the obituary. It happens. These things are still around. It's a kind of pernicious racism that's there, but it's just the way the Tallahassee Democrat runs its stuff. We don't say much about it because it certainly provides an opportunity to keep track of things. But then there are others that occur during the other parts of the week too. There's a few here and there, but in general the bulk of them occur on Thursday. I don't know what. I kind of wonder how they manage to do that. Because people die all during the week. But so then that's the one thing we need to do is get involved. People need to become involved in it, and there's no way to do that unless the folks get serious about it. And see, the thing about when you're young, you got a lot of time. You say, well, you know, and it's amazing. I never missed an opportunity to vote. Even when I was overseas, I'd still vote. And so we were told early, you gotta vote. You have, that's why all of this went along. That was the whole struggle, voting. And the raison d'etre for the NAACP is voting. That's what they're about. And that's why it's important that people realize, and especially the younger ones. So what you're going to be doing, and others, is getting involved in voting and making sure that your friends vote and your relatives vote. And that's part of the family tradition. Because if they vote, these kids could turn this thing around in one cycle. And this upcoming cycle is when it should change. We need to get rid of the filibuster, of course, but that can take 60 senators can do it, and that's going to be difficult to do because I don't know what people vote on. And for example, women, it's always been known that white women could get abortion because they had money to go to places, you go to Europe, anywhere else like that. But that's not been true. Now, nobody's going to go back to the kinds of days that they had in the old days, pretty much. They're going to find ways around. But it's slowly getting choked off, one by one. And I don't understand how a politician, and I'm not sure who's from Gainesville, can come out and say that he supports the abolition of Roe v. Wade and then get voted back into office. That should be anathema to him. He shouldn't even want to stand up, but he probably does. And like people will come and say, I don't like critical race theory. And they'll ask him, what is your life? He says, well, I don't understand it, but I don't like it. I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what it is. Next question, good.
I think that just about.
I was gonna ask. You mentioned earlier that you didn't want to go to Vietnam when you were in the service. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah. Vietnam. I became disenchanted with the war early, and I was over in Japan, and that war was a lot closer to me than I thought, and I would see people, but I decided that this was not a good time. They were going to send me to Galveston, Texas for training. I was supposed to direct bombers to strikes and stuff like that, and because only officers could do that. But and I was I guess I would say the early version of drones. We didn't have drones then, but we had men in aircraft, and I would call the pilots up and tell them where to go, because I had a radar that would tell me exactly where the target was. And we did that practice up in New York all the time. And my job was to tell aircraft and guide them using a computer and a radar system to tell them where to hit a target. So they had these things in the jungle that put up these trailers festooned with all kinds of electronics. They were killing them though. They were dying in these things. So they needed replacement, so of course I was going to be a replacement. So I was prepared to go. And so something, I don't know what the military, they decided they needed somebody in some kind of place in Japan, and there was nobody available, so they just pick a number, you know, and my number in the specialty that I had got sent me. I said, okay, I'll take it. I didn't want to go to Vietnam anyway. I decided the war was a bad idea, and I didn't think we should have been there. The French learned that the hard way, and we went back and did the same stupid thing, and spent 10 years there. Anyway, so by the time I had spent a year and a half in Japan and decided, I knew then that my next assignment was going to be in Vietnam. No two ways about it. By this time, my luck had run out. I said, they're gonna ship me off because I've already been trained to go there. Mm-hmm. So I then decided, let me get out of here. So I went to the colonel and told him, I said, listen, I'm going to get out and go to graduate school. And he said, oh, great, okay. I remember the colonel one time said to me, he said, well, look, you've moved up in the world. Why is it other black people can't do the same thing? It's the same reason you're not a general. We're not all going to do this. Some of us will go here and stuff, but we just need to have the opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's all that it's about. Yeah. And so that's why, but Vietnam was what did it for me. And I didn't want to spend the rest of I knew then that the longer I stayed in the Air Force, the further advanced mathematics would get behind me. I had a hard time catching up by the time I did get into school. And so then I decided that let me get out of here now while I can, because it would be a long time before the next promotion come along, and I didn't particularly want to stay there. I enjoyed it, but it had just run out of its usefulness. I was never committed to it to begin with, but as I said, the threat of the draft pushed me in, and it was a good experience. I learned a lot. I got a lot of cheap education that was worth millions of dollars, and so then it benefited me in graduate school because I was an expert in electronics by that time, and I really knew this stuff, and I got my way through school that way, and so the rest is history. So I just do that. What else? Vietnam. So Vietnam is what caused me to really think about getting out of the military. Now, a lot of these guys in here are veterans of Vietnam. A couple of them spent their entire career. I could have done that too. When I went in, I was expected to stay 20 years. No, I did 6, and that was as much as I could do. That was plenty for me, but it was okay. But so that's the long and short of it. But the biggest thing was the Jim Crow thing. It was all the way throughout my life, and it's never really up. That's why I'm so worked up. When these shows come on, I'm just incredulous. There's an article in The Hill, you got to read it, about what happened with this website designer and what they did with that piece of this. That's a pernicious decision. That is hard to believe they did that. How they let a fake case come to the court is just mind-blowing. It didn't even exist, yet they made a decision on free speech. Like I said, a pizza artisan can come along and decide, I'm an artisan, I'm an art, I do pizza as an art form. It's my expression. And I don't want to make a pizza for you because my freedom of speech tells me that this is not what I want to do, so you can't eat here. What? I can't. And this is doing of a protected class. I'm also a member of a protected class as well. Am I going to be told that I got to leave after having sat down at lunch counters when I was in my 20s and now I got to go back through this again? No way. It ain't going to happen. So, of course, I can go other places, but at that time we couldn't do that. You're waiting to do other interviews. Anyway, so that's one of the things that caused me to change in a lot of ways. So it's affected my life, of course. It cannot, and I don't know if you ever had this experience. Are you Hispanic or what?
Yeah.
Chinese, Asian? Oh, you're Hispanic.
Yeah, yeah, I'm Latina. Yeah.
And as I said before, Asians are not discriminated against at Harvard when they are 20% of the student population. 20%. That's not an issue. And they're not 20% of the population in the country. And so none of them complained. There were none of them. They just dug up something. How do you manage to make a decision on hypotheticals? Is that what the Supreme Court now is doing? Hypothetical rulings on things that don't exist? My God, where can we go from here? This is astonishing, and I got my son and my daughter-in-law are still paying off student loans. They're like 40. Some of them would be that's some crap. See, that's another reason for the youth to get involved. They're trying to starve you to death. They're trying to keep you. Remember, Ronald Reagan says that putting everybody through school creates a proletariat that's dangerous, that we should not do that. And he ruined the University of California educational system. Now everybody has to pay and pay dearly. He cut out free. You could go to Berkeley for free one time. Berkeley. and now that's not possible anymore because of Reagan. He started this. That's when it began. It started down that slippery slope, and we've been going there ever since. So college students tend to be more independently thinking. That's why they don't want as many people. They don't think everybody should get college degrees because that represents a dangerous threat to their autonomy. And racism and white supremacy is still very much alive in this country. We've got to, there's no reason for it. What's going to happen in Florida? You know, a lot of these migrant workers are going to leave. Who's going to pick this stuff? It's just wait until there was one show. What if they all left? This country would dry up and die. Vicente Fox, who used to be president of Mexico, one time said that a lot of them would come to here and pick lettuce and tomatoes. And they would do jobs that even black people wouldn't do. That we didn't. And that kind of stuff. So it's different, but they don't realize that. Of course, you know, they're not going to do it because it's an exploited labor force. And they're not going to ever really run a good. Migrants are going to be in this country, and that's why I look at Fox News. I hate it, but I look at it because I want to see what they're thinking. And it's astonishing what's going on. This is what some of this poison comes from. Some people never look at anything else. The social media, I'm amazed at how much that is. I tuned into TikTok the other day. I said, my God, look at what's out there. It's on my phone. I don't know, and I just never cared to look at it. But I'm discovering there's a ton of stuff. And you'd be surprised, the kind of platforms, they're all over the place. I counted about 10 of them. 10. I barely even Facebook, I have a Facebook account, but I really don't pay attention because I don't care to tell you what I ate for breakfast in the morning. You know, it doesn't- that kind. So all of these means I do websites myself. I did that for about 6 or 7 organizations, so I know how to do websites and design. I can't imagine myself turning somebody down just because I don't like you. And I don't do it for a business anyway. I don't make money off of it, anything like that. But it's something that I've learned how to do because I like computers and stuff. But anyway, that's kind of what it was. But Vietnam was definitely a turning point for me, and I got against that war early on, and the military had me brainwashed at first. It's amazing how effective they are. I'll never forget a particular experience when I was in Texas. I was in training to be an officer, and I remember that one day I was looking at the window and I saw the new recruits coming in. And I said, how crude they look. They don't look polished at all. I'm looking down my nose at people that I was just like a few weeks ago. What have I become? I couldn't believe it. I remember that experience. I said, no, this can't be me. This is not what I'm about. And so it's been like that ever since. I had a roommate who was a Southerner. He couldn't stand being my roommate. I had never been in an experience with white people in my entire career through college until I got into the Air Force. Then it became an integrated situation, so I got used to it, different. And that was the opening up of my understanding of what's really out there. And like I said, the experience in Mississippi, that's why I don't go to Mississippi today. I don't have it's different, of course, because they got gambling there and everything else like that. I know people go there all the time now and stuff like that, but I couldn't get out of there quick enough. Especially that bus incident, asking me to get to the back of the bus, and I'm a military officer and all that kind of stuff. Are you out of your mind? I don't do that anymore. And so I just couldn't deal with that aspect of it. Those kinds of things you don't forget. It's just a slight that stays with you. So that's what the Jim Crow thing was all about for my entire life. And that's why today we're not surprised at what we see because we've seen it before. We've been here, been there, done that. And so it doesn't shock us as much as it does some people who've never had that experience. And that they will do this to people, but they will. And you got politicians who take advantage of it. Ron DeSantis is he's trying to be more Trump than Trump. He's trying to out-Trump Trump, and that can't be done. But that's another ball game. That's another story. And like I said, the thing to do is get these kids to vote and vote, because that is how it's going to turn around. If the voting population, you can change it, but it can't happen if you don't bother to get out. Voting is not going to happen automatically. People are going to have to go and do it.
Definitely. That just about brings an end to our questions. Okay. On behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, we would like to thank you for joining us for this interview.
I enjoyed it.
I think we enjoyed it as well. It's been a very enlightening conversation. Before we end this interview, is there anything else you'd like to add or clarify, or any closing comments?
Oh, let me ask you, how active are the students at the University of Florida in terms of this? I mean, UF is huge. you got a lot, 30, 40,000 students or something like that. And you need to have a voting drive going on down there. I don't know what Alachua, that's the county it's in.
Yeah.
Did during the last election, the midterm. And I know in Tallahassee, this is totally blue up here. No, nobody could ever, no Republican. We have a few Republicans who won something here, but just recently. But that was only because people just didn't pay attention to what was going on. And I know in your county, I'm pretty sure it's blue. I don't know what happens down there. The University of Florida probably can control the voting situation. So what needs to happen is that the students down there need to become very, very active and ready. Even though the county is blue for the most part, you need to have enough voters so that it will cover even the other counties that are adjacent and around you, so you can take the whole region. It's because of the heavy Republican hold down the South. They used to say there's nothing north of I-4. But they need to do that. They can change this state. Charlie Crist should have won, but it just wasn't in the cards for him. And somebody, I don't know if we'll ever have another other than Lawton Chiles, we'll never have another Democrat as a governor of this state. And but it needs to happen. I think the biggest thing is to get control of the legislature. That's really where it is. All politics is local, and Tip O'Neill said that years ago, and that's important. And we need to have that done so that people can make a difference and change it. And that cannot happen without political activation, political activism. And they don't want that. That's the last thing the Republicans want to have. And I think it can go back to being, like they say, your dad's GOP, but there were Republicans that I respected many years ago, Jacob Javits and people like that, and others, but things have changed. They don't have any. It's hard to believe that they've all come along. There are 12 people running for president on the GOP side. None of them got a chance. None of them. They're all. Nikki Haley, for example, the other day said that she doesn't think that migrants who come here illegally, have a baby, shouldn't get to be automatic citizens. That right should not be granted to them. She knows she can't get it done because it's in the Constitution. She can't change that, but she would like to do that. Of all things, an Indian, Push, I think she's a Punjabi, I think. Anyway, how can she feel that? How does a minority come across thinking like this? But hey, we got Clarence Thomas, that tells me. So you've got to think about these things. There are some people out there, it's not going to be as easy as they think it is, especially if the people become active. Like I just said, vote, 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 vote. And if that happens, they always notice, oh my God, they're going to turn us out. Turn the rascals out. Get them out of here. And then we will see changes happen. Once you get control of the electorate, then you can see changes. They can roll back a lot of this stuff. It is possible to save this country unless there's a program called Oppenheimer. You ought to look at that sometime. This is how we're going to destroy the world. It's scary. This war going on right now in Ukraine shouldn't have happened. The U.S. There was one way to get peace, but the U.S. objected to it. The fact that NATO, I think NATO is one of the real causes. The Russians are paranoid. They've had remember the Japanese invaded them once. And so they're very, for whatever reason, they're paranoid about any kind of encroachment, and we like to push as close. Why should NATO be right next to us? It doesn't make sense to me. And that's a threat. And people can go crazy anytime. And we know that's what happened in World War II. We don't want to start down that road because it'll be, Americans are sanguine enough to believe that they can win a nuclear war. Can you believe that? How could anybody? I was in that business. I know what it's about. I used to be in control of missiles that had nuclear weapons on them. And my job was to launch one of them. It killed people I didn't even know or had ever seen. That was a scary thought, to have that kind of power and that kind of responsibility. It's not nice, and it is not a pleasant thing to think about. I knew that if the war started, I would die early in a hole deep underground. I mean, it was a frightening prospect. Fortunately, I got out of that business too and went into other things. You know. Anyway, that's what it's about. Things have changed on a global basis, and people need to realize that. Eisenhower warned us about the industrial military complex. We didn't take the warning seriously. Now we're paying the price for that. So, but about this country's racism, it's still there, and they need to get. I think that the threat, that replacement theory. Remember that's what's going on out here. That they're going to be replaced by this group or that group. Well, probably so. It's not going to be replaced. It's just going to be sharing. California's already there. It's just a matter of time. And the reason that people are coming here is because we're driving them here. Where do you think the guns come from in Mexico? Mexico doesn't make guns. They don't make guns. They get them from us. We give the Mexicans guns so they can do all kinds of stuff. That's where the drug cartels come from. And the drugs are there because we want the drugs here. We're the biggest attractor for the drug business. If we didn't do it, then there would be no business in here. They would still be growing corn and stuff like that, but instead of poppy seeds. So it's all part of that. And I'm a political junkie. I watch the news all the time. And one of my favorite things is I have a satellite TV, so I watch Free Speech TV. That's one of my favorite things. They have all kinds of good stuff on. And you have to watch the things that give you information, but read a lot, you know. You'd be surprised what's going on out there. But the biggest thing is that take it back to the campus and make sure that these kids get involved. If you get the students, at FAMU, for the most part, they're all registered as far as I know. A lot of them are. We don't have good registration. I found out that in this area that pretty much everybody's registered. The problem is getting out the vote. The people are, especially among the young and the educated, they're registered, but they don't vote very often. It's hard to imagine missing a cycle to vote. Some people say, well, it doesn't do any good. Yes, it does. It makes a difference. You'd be surprised how many, a few votes here and a few votes there make a difference. Al Gore would have won if they hadn't stopped counting the votes. He did win in Florida. But hey, we know the history of how that happened. The Supreme Court got involved and gave it to Bush. And how we got into a war for 20 years is beyond belief. When the Russians spent 10 years and got their butts kicked, and we had to go in and do 20. How insane is that? Yeah. What causes a country to go like that? And we love it. a lot of the guys I see wear hats as a Vietnam vet, and I would never do that, but it's just, I was never actually in the war. I saw it just a tiny bit. I remember I was flying from somewhere. I guess I was going to Taiwan, that's what, because I went all over the place. And we flew over Vietnam. And the pilot, it was a commercial jet. And he said, well, there's a hell of a fight going on down there with all the flashes. He said, we're okay at 35,000 feet. Okay. For that day, I got combat pay just from flying over that war zone. Then I came back next month, going back the other way, more combat pay. Just flying over it, just being exposed. It was a pernicious. Vietnam is one of our biggest allies now. All 40,000 people died, 50,000 died in a war that shouldn't have been necessary. It's just incredible. And sooner or later, it's scary to think that we're going to wind up in Ukraine. I hope not. But it's, and that country is just going to be slowly wiped out, brick by brick. And then once it's over, we're going to have to rebuild it, brick by brick. It'll get rebuilt. Same thing, man. We go through these wars of destruction. It's just going to happen again. Anyway, and all of this is racially driven in some way or another, but not in Ukraine. That's a little different. That's because of politics. But, and Putin's thing. For example, you know, in Germany, 14 attempts were made on Hitler's life, but nobody ever succeeded. They tried to kill him many times. And that's why Putin is paranoid too. I can understand it. He's just one bullet away from being eliminated, and something could happen. I'm just hoping. Most of us were surprised that Obama lived through 2 terms. We thought somebody would come after him. But I always knew that once it was because of Obama that Trump became president. If Obama had not been president, Trump would have never gotten there. It was because he used that to build his political career. That was the reason. I could blame Obama for Trump. Not directly, but indirectly, and that's what happened. And we know how that came about. And they're still doing it. They're still trying to find some way to demonize him. And it's like this stuff. They're trying to get rid of Biden. He's going to win. I don't see any way. They're saying he's too old. Come on. There are a lot. Nancy Pelosi, she's even older. She's very smart. And so it's not going to happen. I think he'll get reelected. I can't believe anybody wants a president who might be wearing an ankle bracelet the time he gets sworn on. But they might. They just might. It's just hard to believe. So you're going to have to make sure that the kids are very active, and voter registration and it's not so much the registration, because I'm sure that a lot of the students at UF are registered in wherever town they come from. Mm-hmm. But the hardest thing to do is get them to show up and vote. Vote. And that's really what matters. Turning out the vote. The turnout is all that matters. It's not the registration. Registration helps get the few who are still out there, but gotta have. I do souls to the polls, stuff like that. Take them to. We'll take them. People do that. They'll stand in line. I think this is going to be a different one. I'm hoping that they finally are waking up and smelling the coffee, and it's not smelling good. that things need to change.
Yeah.
And the only way that's going to happen is if people bother to come out and show up and do the voting, and that will change everything.
Definitely. Well, thank you again so
Sure.
much for taking the time to speak
All
with
right,
us.
enjoyed it.
This concludes our interview.
I got a chance to get a lot off my chest.
You did. Thank you so much.
All right.
You play the middle or the top? Oh my goodness.